I'm less interested in what people think and more interested in how they came to think it and how they maintain it as valid. This talk will not only consider such frames of reference, as they're often called, frames of reference individual people utilize to generate and support their decisions and beliefs, but also the larger order institutions that arise from those referential assumptions, once they are shared by a large enough group of people to hence define social normality, which of course is the status quo that we all know. Then these status quo practices will be qualified or even quantified against what we could haphazardly call our objective reality, which will draw its assumptions from a completely different referential benchmark than most of the population of the world is familiar with, a frame of reference we have come to know as the scientific method. Now, you'll notice I said haphazardly term an objective reality. Why? Because the concept of objective can only be hyperbole, right? How could we possibly be so arrogant to assume at any point in time in human history that we have ever been empirically right? It simply hasn't happened yet if you take the broad view. It wasn't until the past couple hundred years that the scientific method has barely been taken seriously with respect to human affairs and society. And what is the core mechanism of the scientific method really? Self-correction. Self-correction through testing and logical calculation and hypotheses. The self-correction attribute of science is what enables its evolution. There is no recognized phenomenon that isn't undergoing a constant change of definition as the evolution of knowledge continues. Truth itself is an emergent distinction. It's not a noun, it's more of a verb, which constitutes an approach towards reality, but never, ever getting there. That said, it's obvious that we're doing something right, you know. The fact that this building we're in hasn't collapsed upon us means we have been able to come in harmony with some kind of natural physical law that exists beyond our control. The fact that we understand to a certain degree how our bodies work, creating, say, medicines that can help us in positive ways over statistical time, shows that we are indeed in some kind of alignment with what we call nature, as opposed to blaming our sickness on gods and demons as we did in the past as this organism of knowledge continues to evolve. There does seem to be a pre-existing logic, and this is important to note because people take this for granted, a logic, in fact, which dictates our reality and doesn't give a damn what we think of it and impose upon it. It appears we can either be vulnerable and align as best we can and engage this harmony, or we can walk against it, fight it to our personal and social disadvantage. The unfortunate thing is, as I will continue to address later in detail, our basic social construct as a whole, top to bottom, along with the dominant human values inherent to it that support it, appear to be firmly walking against the natural order that exists, that we are slowly discovering, becoming more and more decoupled from reality, as it were, and hence really our life support. For the sake of argument, I would like to quickly reduce human perception to two basic modes of operation: emergent and traditional. Today, the traditional element is clearly the most dominant. It's the cultural zeitgeist, if you will, no pun intended, is always based on institutions that are tending to perpetuate themselves, non-emergent thought processes and their consequences. Why? Because, well, they're forms of psychological security, aren't they? They're also forms of financial security. Our whole society is actually based upon institutional self-perpetuation, whether it is the preservation of a political administration, a corporation's market share and hence dominance, or say even a religious demographic. In fact, the traditional notion is so powerful that the very act of questioning is often met with disdain in the culture today. Some, in their defense, have even gone so far to suggest that all beliefs and values must be equal and respected, and they must be tolerated in the same element of quality. Is that true? Are all values equal? Does everyone have the right to believe and hence act upon whatever they choose? Are we all to respect everything others want us to? If I put a gun to your head and have the value and belief that you should die, is that acceptable to you? Are you a bigot for not allowing me to express my freedom of belief? Obviously, values are not equal. Some work and some don't. Or more specifically, some represent a closer approximation to reality and others do not. And the farther those values are from this natural order, the more destructive they often become, not just to the individual or group, but to all of us as a collective society. And there rests a distinct social imperative that is often ignored or feared. The taboo associated with challenging what others think under the still convenient notion that all values are equal is simply not tenable. You are, in fact, partially responsible for the thoughts and values of others, and they are, in fact, responsible for yours. There is nowhere to hide from the collective consciousness, and an underlying thesis of this presentation is that until a human society is able to find and share a basic, common, working, responsible, near-empirical value set, we're basically doomed. My hope here, in turn, is to generate a personal and social reflection, if you will, with respect to what you believe and why, eventually to be framed within the social context I keep alluding to. It will be argued that the failure of emergent perception to be open and listen to the world we live in rather than impose upon it, with these traditional assumptions we blindly hold as empirical, is the psychological root of the problems we see in the world today, environmental, social. It is a value system disorder that is continually created and reinforced by the social system we inhabit and share ideologically. And if uncorrected, it could lead to the collapse of human society as we know it today. A collapse, by the way, which, if you're paying attention, is accelerating right now across the world. Fueled again by a set of detrimental perspectives that go largely unrecognized, like cancer cells go unrecognized to an immune system.